Shetland, also called the Shetland Islands, is a subarctic archipelago of Scotland that lies northeast of mainland Britain. The islands lie some 80 km to the northeast of Orkney and 280 km southeast of the Faroe Islands and form part of the division between the Atlantic Ocean to the west and the North Sea to the east. The total area is 1,468 km2 and the population totaled 23,167 in 2011. Comprising the Shetland constituency of the Scottish Parliament, Shetland is also one of the 32 council areas of Scotland. The island's administrative centre and only burgh is Lerwick. The largest island, known simply as mainland, has an area of 967 km2, making it the third largest Scottish island and the fifth largest of the British Isles. There are an additional 15 inhabited islands. The archipelago has an oceanic climate, a complex geology, a rugged coastline and many low, rolling hills. Humans have lived there since the Mesolithic period, and the earliest written references to the island date back to Roman times. The early historic period was dominated by Scandinavian influences, especially Norway, and the islands did not become part of Scotland until the 15th century. When Shetland became part of the Kingdom of Great Britain in 1707, trade with Northern Europe decreased. Fishing has continued to be an important aspect of the economy up to the present day. The discovery of North Sea oil in the 1970s significantly boosted Shetland incomes, employment and public sector revenues. The local way of life reflects the joint Norse and Scottish heritage including the Uphellior Fire Festival, and a strong musical tradition, especially the traditional fiddle style. The islands have produced a variety of writers of prose and poetry, many of whom use the local Shetlandic dialect. There are numerous areas set aside to protect the local fauna and flora, including a number of important seabird nesting sites. The Shetland pony and Shetland sheepdog are two well-known Shetland animal breeds. The island's motto, which appears on the council's coat of arms, is made a Grilla paragraph Garm skal land byggja. This Icelandic phrase is taken from Njal's saga and means by law shall the land be built up. Etymology. In AD 43 and 77 the Roman authors Pomponius Mela and Pliny the Elder referred to the seven islands they call Hyamodi and Akmodi respectively, both of which are assumed to be Shetland. Another possible early written reference to the islands is Tacitus' report in AD 98, after describing the discovery and conquest of Orkney, that the Roman fleet had seen Thule too. In early Irish literature, Shetland is referred to as Inskati the Isles of Cats, which may have been the pre-Norse inhabitants' name for the islands. The Cat tribe also occupied parts of the northern Scottish mainland and their name can be found in Caithness, and in the Gaelic name for Sutherland. The oldest version of the modern name Shetland is Hetlandensis, the Latinized adjectival form of the Old Norse name recorded in a letter from Harold Count of Shetland in 1190, becoming Hetland in 1431 after various intermediate transformations. It is possible that the Pictish cat sound forms part of this Norse name. It then became Jötland in the 16th century. As Norn was gradually replaced by Scots, Jötland became Uitland. The initial letter is the Middle Scots letter, young, the pronunciation of which is almost identical to the original Norn sound. When the use of the letter y was discontinued, it was often replaced by the similar-looking letter z, hence Zetland, the misspelt form used to describe the pre-1975 county council. Most of the individual islands have Norse names, although the derivations of some are obscure and may represent pre-Norse, possibly Pictish or even pre-Celtic names or elements. Geography and geology. Shetland is around 170 kilometres north of mainland Scotland, covers an area of 1,468 square kilometres and has a coastline 2,702 kilometres long. Lerwick, the capital and largest settlement, has a population of 6,958 and about half of the archipelago's total population of 23,167 people live within 16 kilometres of the town. Scholaway on the west coast, which was the capital until 1708, has a population of less than 1,000. Only 16 of about 100 islands are inhabited. The main island of the group is known as the mainland and of the next largest, ʻʃɛtlənd, and ffitla lie to the north and Brasey and Walsey lie to the east. East and West Burgh, Muckle, Puppestor, Trondra and Vale are smaller islands to the west of mainland. The other inhabited islands are Fowler 28 km west of Walls, Faroe Isle 38 km southwest of Sumburgh Head, and the Outskerries to the east. The uninhabited islands include Mouser, known for the Burgh of Mouser, the finest preserved example in Scotland of these Iron Age round towers. St Ninians Isle connected to mainland by the largest active tombolo in the UK, and Outstack, the northernmost point of the British Isles. Shetland's location means that it provides a number of such records. Munis is the most northerly castle in the United Kingdom and Skor the most northerly settlement. The geology of Shetland is complex, with numerous faults and fold axes. These islands are the northern outpost of the Caledonian orogeny and there are outcrops of Lusian, Dalriadan and Moyne metamorphic rocks with similar histories to their equivalents on the Scottish mainland. Similarly, there are also old red sandstone deposits and granite intrusions. The most distinctive features are the ultra-basic ophiolite, peridotite and gabbro-onunst and ffitla, which are remnants of the Iapetus ocean floor. Much of Shetland's economy depends on the oil-bearing sediments in the surrounding seas. Geological evidence shows that in around 6100 BC a tsunami caused by the Sterregus slides hit Shetland, as well as the rest of the east coast of Scotland, and may have created a wave of up to 25 metres high in the Vos where modern populations are highest. The highest point of Shetland is Ronnes Hill, which only reaches 450 metres in the Pleistocene glaciations entirely covered the islands. The Stands of Stoffest is a 2,000-ton glacial erratic that came to rest on a prominent hilltop in Lunasting during this period. Shetland is a national scenic area, although unusually this single designated area is made up of a number of discrete locations: Fair Isle, Fowler, Southwest Mainland, Muckle, Eshearness, Fetherland and Hermanus. Climate: Shetland has an oceanic subpolar climate, with long but mild winters and short, cool summers. The climate all year round is moderate due to the influence of the surrounding seas, with average peak temperatures of 5 degrees Celsius in March and 14 degrees Celsius in July and August. Temperatures over 21 degrees Celsius are very rare. The highest temperature on record was 23.4 degrees Celsius in July 1991 and the coldest at 8.9 degrees Celsius in the Januaries of 1952 and 1959. The frost-free period may be as little as 3 months. In contrast, inland areas of nearby Scandinavia on similar latitudes experience significantly larger temperature differences between summer and winter, with the average highs of regular July days comparable to Shetland's all-time records heat, further demonstrating the moderating effect of the Atlantic Ocean. In contrast, winters are considerably milder than those expected in nearby continental areas, even comparable to winter temperatures of many parts of England and Wales much further south. The general character of the climate is windy and cloudy with at least 2 of rain falling on more than 250 days a year. Average yearly precipitation is 1,003 with November and December the wettest months. Snowfall is usually confined to the period November to February, and snow seldom lies on the ground for more than a day. Less rain falls from April to August although no month receives less than 50 Fog is common during summer due to the cooling effect of the sea on mild southerly air flows. Due to the island's latitude, on clear winter nights the northern lights can sometimes be seen in the sky, while in summer there is almost perpetual daylight, a state of affairs known locally as the simmer dim. Annual bright sunshine averages 1090 hours and overcast days are common. Prehistory. Due to the practice, dating to at least the early Neolithic, of building in stone on virtually treeless islands, Shetland is extremely rich in physical remains of the prehistoric eras and there are over 5,000 archaeological sites all told. A midden site at West Foe on the south coast of mainland, dated to 4320–4030 BC, has provided the first evidence of Mesolithic human activity on Shetland. The same site provides dates for early Neolithic activity and finds at Skord of Brewster and Walls have been dated to 3400 BC. Shetland knives are stone tools that date from this period made from felsite from North Maveen. Pottery shards found at the important site of Gilshoff also indicate that there was Neolithic activity there, although the main settlement dates from the Bronze Age. This includes a smithy, a cluster of wheelhouses and a later broch. The site has provided evidence of habitation during various phases right up until Viking times. Heel-shaped cairns are a style of chambered cairn unique to Shetland, with a particularly large example on Vementry. Numerous brochs were erected during the Iron Age. In addition to Mouser, there are significant ruins at Clickermin, Culswick, Old Scatness and West Burgh Firth, although their origin and purpose is a matter of some controversy. The later Iron Age inhabitants of the Northern Isles were probably Pictish, although the historical record is sparse. Hunter states in relation to King Bride, one of the Picts in the 6th century AD, as for Shetland, Orkney, Skye and the Western Isles, their inhabitants, most of whom appear to have been Pictish in culture and speech at this time, are likely to have regarded Bride as a fairly distant presence. In 2011, the collective site, the Crucible of Iron Age Shetland including Broch of Mouser, Old Scatness and Gilshoff joined the UK's tentative list of World Heritage Sites. History. Scandinavian colonisation. The expanding population of Scandinavia led to a shortage of available resources and arable land there and led to a period of Viking expansion, the Norse gradually shifting their attention from plundering to invasion. Shetland was colonised during the late 8th and 9th centuries, the fate of the existing indigenous population being uncertain. Modern Shetlanders have almost identical proportions of Scandinavian matrilineal and patrilineal genetic ancestry, suggesting that the islands were settled by both men and women in equal measure. Vikings then made the islands the headquarters of pirate expeditions carried out against Norway and the coasts of mainland Scotland. In response, Norwegian King Harald Hardrafagre annexed the Northern Isles in 875. Rognvald Eystein received Orkney in Shetland from Harald as an earldom as reparation for the death of his son in battle in Scotland, and then passed the earldom on to his brother Sigurd the Mighty. The islands were Christianized in the late 10th century. King Olaf Tryggvason summoned the Jarl Sigurd the Stout during a visit to Orkney and said, "I order you and all your subjects to be baptized. If you refuse, I'll have you killed on the spot and I swear I will ravage every island with fire and steel." Unsurprisingly, Sigurd agreed and the islands became Christian at a stroke. Unusually, from c. 1100 onwards the Norse Jarls owed allegiance both to Norway and to the Scottish crown through their holdings as Earls of Caithness. In 1194, when Harold Medadson was Earl of Orkney in Shetland, a rebellion broke out against King Sverre Sigurdsson of Norway. The Aesk sailed for Norway but were beaten in the Battle of Florøyengi near Bergen. After his victory King Sverre placed Shetland under direct Norwegian rule, a state of affairs that continued for nearly 2 centuries. Increased Scottish interest. From the mid-13th century onwards Scottish monarchs increasingly sought to take control of the islands surrounding the mainland. The process was begun in earnest by Alexander II and was continued by his successor Alexander III. This strategy eventually led to an invasion by Håkon Håkonsson, King of Norway. His fleet assembled in Brazos Sound before sailing for Scotland. After the stalemate of the Battle of Largs, Håkon retreated to Orkney, where he died in December 1263, entertained on his deathbed by recitations of the sagas. His death halted any further Norwegian expansion in Scotland and following this ill-fated expedition, the Hebrides and Man were yielded to the Kingdom of Scotland as a result of the 1266 Treaty of Perth, although the Scots recognised continuing Norwegian sovereignty over Orkney and Shetland. Pawn to Scotland. In the 14th century, Orkney and Shetland remained a Norwegian province, but Scottish influence was growing. John Haraldsson, who was murdered in Thurso in 1231, was the last of an unbroken line of Norsejarls, and thereafter the Earls were Scots noblemen of the houses of Angus and St. Clair. On the death of Håkon VI in 1380, Norway formed a political union with Denmark after which the interest of the royal house in the islands declined. In 1469, Shetland was pledged by Christian I, in his capacity as King of Norway, as security against the payment of the dowry of his daughter Margaret, betrothed to James III of Scotland. As the money was never paid, the connection with the Crown of Scotland has become perpetual. In 1470, William Sinclair, 1st Earl of Caithness, ceded his title to James III, and the following year the Northern Isles were directly annexed to the Crown of Scotland, a process confirmed by Parliament in 1472. Nonetheless, Shetland's connection with Norway has proven to be enduring. From the early 15th century on, the Shetlanders sold their goods through the Hanseatic League of German merchantmen. The Hansa would buy shiploads of salted fish, wool and butter, and import salt, cloth, beer and other goods. The late 16th century and early 17th century was dominated by the influence of the despotic Robert Stewart, Earl of Orkney, who was granted the islands by his half-sister Mary Queen of Scots, and his son Patrick. The latter commenced the building of Scolloway Castle, but after his imprisonment in 1609 the Crown annexed Orkney in Shetland again until 1643, when Charles I granted them to William Douglas, 7th Earl of Morton. These rights were held on and off by the Mortons until 1766, when they were sold by James Douglas, 14th Earl of Morton, to Lawrence Dundas. Early British rule. The trade with the North German towns lasted until the 1707 Act of Union, when high salt duties prohibited the German merchants from trading with Shetland. Shetland then went into an economic depression as the Scottish and local traders were not as skilled in trading with salted fish. However, some local merchant leads took up where the German merchants had left off, and fitted out their own ships to export fish from Shetland to the continent. For the independent farmers of Shetland this had negative consequences, as they now had to fish for these merchant lairds. Smallpox afflicted the islands in the 17th and 18th centuries, but as vaccines became common after 1760 the population increased to a maximum of 31,670 in 1861. However, British rule came at price for many ordinary people as well as traders. The Shetlanders' nautical skills were sought by the Royal Navy. Some 3,000 served during the Napoleonic Wars from 1800 to 1815, and press gangs were rife. During this period 120 men were taken from Fitlar alone and only 20 of them returned home. By the late 19th century 90% of all Shetland was owned by just 32 people, and between 1861 and 1881 more than 8,000 Shetlanders emigrated. With the passing of the Crofters Act in 1886 the Liberal Prime Minister William Gladstone emancipated crofters from the rule of the landlords. The Act enabled those who had effectively been landowners' serfs to become owner-occupiers of their own small farms. By this time fishermen from Holland, who had traditionally gathered each year off the coast of Shetland to fish for herring, triggered an industry in the islands that boomed from around 1880 until the 1920s, when stocks of the fish began to dwindle. 20th century. During World War I many Shetlanders served in the Gordon Highlanders, a further 3,000 served in the Merchant Navy and more than 1,500 in a special local naval reserve. The 10th Cruiser Squadron was stationed at Swarbaxmingham during a single year. From March 1917 more than 4,500 ships sailed from Lerwick as part of an escorted convey system. In total, Shetland lost more than 500 men, a higher proportion than any other part of Britain, and there were further waves of emigration in the 1920s and 1930s. During World War II a Norwegian naval unit nicknamed the Shetland Buzz was established by the Special Operations Executive in the autumn of 1940, with a base first at Lunner and later in Scolloway to conduct operations around the coast of Norway. About 30 fishing vessels used by Norwegian refugees were gathered, and the Shetland Bus conducted cover operations, carrying intelligence agents, refugees, instructors for the resistance, and military supplies. It made over 200 trips across the sea, with Leif Larsen, the most highly decorated Allied naval officer of the war, making 52 of them. Several RAF bases were also established at Salamvo, and several lighthouses suffered enemy air attacks. Oil reserves discovered in the later 20th century in the seas both east and west of Shetland have provided a much-needed alternative source of income for the islands. The East Shetland Basin is one of Europe's largest oil fields, and as a result of the oil revenue and the cultural links with Norway, a small independence movement developed briefly. its oar as its model the Isle of Man, as well as Shetland's closest neighbour, the Faroe Islands, an autonomous dependency of Denmark. Economy. Today, the main revenue producers in Shetland are agriculture, aquaculture, fishing, renewable energy, the petroleum industry, the creative industries and tourism. Fishing remains central to the island's economy today, with the total catch being 75,767 tonnes in 2009, valued at over £73.2 million. Mackerel makes up more than half of the catch in Shetland by weight and value, and there are significant landings of haddock, cod, herring, whiting, monkfish and shellfish. Farming is mostly concerned with the raising of Shetland sheep, known for their unusually fine wool. Crops raised include oats and barley. However, the cold, wind-swept islands make for a harsh environment for most plants. Crofting, the farming of small plots of land on a legally restricted tenancy basis, is still practiced and viewed as a key Shetland tradition as well as important source of income. Oil and gas was first landed at Sullomvo in 1978, and it has subsequently become one of the largest terminals in Europe. Taxes from the oil have increased public sector spending on social welfare, art, sport, environmental measures and financial development. Three-quarters of the island's workforce is employed in the service sector and Shetland Islands Council alone accounted for 27.9% of outputs in 2003. Shetland's access to oil revenues has funded the Shetland Charitable Trust which in turn funds a wide variety of local programmes. The balance of the fund in 2011 was £217 million, that is, about £9,500 per head. In January 2007, the Shetland Islands Council signed a partnership agreement with Scottish and Southern Energy for the Viking Wind Farm, a 200-turbine wind farm and subsea cable. This renewable energy project would produce about 600 megawatts and contribute about £20 million to the Shetland economy per year. The plan is meeting significant opposition within the islands, primarily resulting from the anticipated visual impact of the development. The Pure project announced as a research centre which uses a combination of wind power and fuel cells to create a wind hydrogen system. The project is run by the Unst Partnership, the local community's development trust. Knitwear is important both to the economy and culture of Shetland and the Faroe Isle design is well known. However, the industry faces challenges due to plagiarism of the word Shetland by manufacturers operating elsewhere and a certification trademark, the Shetland Lady, has been registered. Shetland is served by a weekly local newspaper, the Shetland Times and the online Shetland News with radio service being provided by BBC Radio Shetland and the commercial radio station SIBC. Shetland is a popular destination for cruise ships and in 2010 the Lonely Planet guide named Shetland as the 6th best region in the world for tourists seeking unspoilt destinations. The islands were described as a early beautiful and rewarding, and the Shetlanders as a fiercely independent and self-reliant bunch. Overall visitor expenditure was worth £16.4 million in 2006, in which year just under 26,000 cruise liner passengers arrived at Lerwick Harbour. In 2009, the most popular visitor attractions were the Shetland Museum, the RSPB Reserve at Burgh Head, Bonnegger Gallery at Idale Mill and Jewelshof. Transport between islands is primarily by ferry, and Shetland Islands Council operates various inter-island services. Shetland is also served by a domestic connection from Lerwick to Aberdeen on mainland Scotland. This service, which takes about 12 hours, is operated by Northlink Ferries. Some services also call at Kirkwall, Orkney, which increases the journey time between Aberdeen and Lerwick by 2 hours. Burgh Airport, the main airport on Shetland, is located close to Burgh Head, 40 km south of Lerwick. Loganger operates flights for Flybe to other parts of Scotland up to 10 times a day, the destinations being Kirkwall, Aberdeen, Inverness, Glasgow and Edinburgh. Lerwick Tingwall Airport is located 11 km west of Lerwick. Operated by Direct Flight Limited in partnership with Shetland Islands Council, it is devoted to inter-island flights from the Shetland mainland to most of the inhabited islands. Skatstad Airport near Salomonvoe allows frequent charter flights from Aberdeen to transport oil field workers, and this small terminal has the fifth largest number of international passengers in Scotland. Public bus services are operated on mainland, Walsay, Burgh, Unst and Yell. The archipelago is exposed to wind and tide, and there are numerous sites of wrecked ships. Lighthouses are sited as an aid to navigation at various locations. Public services. The Shetland Islands Council is the local government authority for all the islands, based in Lerwick Town Hall. Shetland is subdivided into 18 community council areas and into 12 civil parishes that are used for statistical purposes. Education. In Shetland there are 2 high schools, Sir Anderson and Brahe 7 junior high schools, and over 30 primary schools. Shetland is also home to the North Atlantic Fisheries College, the Centre for Nordic Studies and Shetland College, which are all associated with the University of the Highlands and Islands. Sport. The islands are represented by the Shetland football team, who regularly compete in the Island Games. The island's senior football league is the G&S Flooring Premier League. Churches and religion. The Reformation reached the archipelago in 1560. This was an apparently peaceful transition, and there is little evidence of religious intolerance in Shetland's recorded history. A variety of different religious denominations are represented in the islands. The Methodist Church has a relatively high membership in Shetland, which is a district of the Methodist Church. The Church of Scotland is a presbytery of Shetland that includes St Columba's Church in Lerwick. The Scottish Episcopal Church has regular worship at St Magnus Church, Lerwick, St Colman's Church, Bravo, and the Chapel of Christ the Encompasser, Fitlar, the last of which is maintained by the Society of Our Lady of the Isles, the most northerly and remote Anglican religious order of nuns. Politics. Shetland is represented in the House of Commons as part of the Orkney and Shetland constituency, which elects one member of Parliament, the current incumbent being Alistair Carmichael. This seat has been held by the Liberal Democrats or their predecessors, the Liberal Party, since 1950, longer than any other they represent in the UK. In the Scottish Parliament, the Shetland constituency elects one member of the Scottish Parliament by the first-past-the-post system. The current MSP is Tavish Scott of the Scottish Liberal Democrats. Shetland is within the Highlands and Islands electoral region. The political composition of the council is 22 independents. Thus it is one of only 3 councils in Scotland with a majority of elected members not representing a political party. Roy Gra Paragrafenberg, who founded the local chapter of the Scottish National Party in 1966, designed the flag of Shetland in cooperation with Bill Adams to mark the 500th anniversary of the transfer of the islands from Norway to Scotland. The colours are identical to those of the flag of Scotland, but are shaped in the Nordic cross. After several unsuccessful attempts, including a plebiscite in 1985, the Lord Lion King of Arms approved it as the official flag of Shetland in 2005. Local culture and the arts. After the islands were transferred to Scotland, thousands of Scots families emigrated to Shetland in the 16th and 17th centuries, but studies of the genetic makeup of the island's population indicate that Shetlanders are just under half Scandinavian in origin. This combination is reflected in many aspects of local life. For example, almost every place name and use can be traced back to the Vikings. The Norn language was a form of Old Norse, which continued to be spoken until the 18th century, when it was replaced by an insular dialect of Scots known as Shetlandic, which is in turn being replaced by Scottish English. Although Norn was spoken for hundreds of years, it is now extinct and few written sources remain. Shetlandic is used both in local radio and dialect writing, and kept alive by the Shetland Folk Society. The Lerwick Up Heli Or is one of a variety of fire festivals held in Shetland annually in the middle of winter. It is always started on the last Tuesday of January. The festival is just over 100 years old in its present, highly organised form. Originally, a festival held to break up the long nights of winter and mark the end of Yule, the festival has become one celebrating the Isles' heritage and includes a procession of men dressed as Vikings and the burning of a replica longship. The cuisine of Shetland is based on locally produced lamb, beef and seafood, much of it organic. Inevitably, the real ale-producing Valhalla brewery is the most northerly in Britain. The Shetland Black is a variety of blue potato with a dark skin and indigo-coloured flesh markings. Shetland competes in the biennial International Island Games, which it hosted in 2005. Music. Shetland's culture and landscapes have inspired a variety of musicians, writers and filmmakers. The 40 Fiddlers was formed in the 1950s to promote the traditional fiddle style, which is a vibrant part of local culture today. Notable exponents of Shetland folk music include Ellie Bain, Fiddler's Bid, and the late Tom Anderson and Peary Willie Johnson. Thomas Fraser was a country musician who never released a commercial recording during his life, but whose work has become popular more than 20 years after his untimely death in 1978. Writers. Walter Scott's 1822 novel The Pirate is set in a remote part of Shetland, and was inspired by his 1814 visit to the islands. The name Gilshoff meaning Earl's Mansion is a coinage of his. Hugh MacDiarmid, the Scots poet and writer lived in Walsay from the mid-1930s through 1942, and wrote many poems there, including a number that directly address or reflect the Shetland environment such as On a Raised Beach, which was inspired by a visit to West Linga. The 1975 novel North Star by Hammond Innes is largely set in Shetland, and Ramon Munder's 2007 book of poetry A Choreographer's Cartography offers a British Asian perspective on the landscape. The Shetland Quartet by Anne Cleeves, who previously lived in Faroe Isles, is a series of crime novels set around the islands. In 2013 her novel Red Bones became the basis of BBC crime drama television series Shetland. Vag Arland, who grew up in Wales, was arguably Shetland's finest poet of the 20th century. Haldane Burgess was a Shetland historian, poet, novelist, violinist, linguist and socialist, and Rhoda Bulter is one of the best-known Shetland poets of recent times. Other 20th and 21st century poets and novelists include Christine de Luca, Robert Allen Jameson who grew up in Sandnes, the late Lolly Graham of Veensgarth, Stella Sutherland of Braesay, the late William J. Teart from Yell and Laureen Johnson. There are two monthly magazines in production, Shetland Life and ʻʃɛtlənd. The quarterly The New Shetlander, founded in 1947, is said to be Scotland's longest-running literary magazine. For much of the later 20th century it was the major vehicle for the work of local writers, and others, including early work by George Mackay Brown. Films. Michael Powell made The Edge of the World in 1937, a dramatization based on the true story of the evacuation of the last 36 inhabitants of the remote island of St Kilda on August 29, 1930. St Kilda lies in the Atlantic Ocean, 64 kilometers west of the Outer Hebrides, but Powell was unable to get permission to film there. Undaunted, he made the film over 4 months during the summer of 1936 on Fowler, and the film transposes these events to Shetland. 40 years later, the documentary Return to the Edge of the World was filmed, capturing a reunion of cast and crew of the film as they revisited the island in 1978. A number of other films have been made on or about Shetland, including A Crofter's Life in Shetland, A Shetland Lyric, Devil's Gate and It's Nice Up North, a comedy documentary by Graham Fellows. An annual film festival takes place in the newly built Mariel, a cinema, music and education venue. Wildlife. Shetland has 3 national nature reserves, at the seabird colonies of Hermanus and Nos, and at Keene of Hamar to preserve the serpentine flora. There are a further 81 SSSIs, which covers 66% or more of the land surfaces of Faroe Isles, Puppastore, Fitlar, Nos and Fowler. Mainland has 45 separate sites. Flora. The landscape in Shetland is marked by the grazing of sheep, and the harsh conditions have limited the total number of plant species to about 400. Native trees such as rowan and crabapple are only found in a few isolated places such as cliffs and loch islands. The flora is dominated by Arctic alpine plants, wild flowers, moss and lichen. Spring squill, buck's horn plantain, Scots lovage, roseroot and sea campion are abundant, especially in sheltered places. Shetland mouse ear is an endemic flowering plant found only in Shetland. It was first recorded in 1837 by botanist Thomas Edmonston. Although reported from 2 other sites in the 19th century, it currently grows only on 2 serpentine hills on the island of Unst. The nationally scarce oyster plant is found on several islands, and the British red-listed bryophyte Thamnobrium alopecarum has also been recorded. Fauna: Shetland has numerous seabird colonies. Birds found on the islands include Atlantic puffin, storm petrel, red-throated diver, northern gannet and bonxie. Numerous rarities have also been recorded, including black-browed albatross and snow goose, and a single pair of snowy owls bred on Fitlar from 1967 to 1975. The Shetland wren, Faroe wren and Shetland starling are subspecies endemic to Shetland. There are also populations of various moorland birds such as curlew, snipe and golden plover. The geographical isolation and recent glacial history of Shetland have resulted in a depleted mammalian fauna, and the brown rat and house mouse are 2 of only 3 species of rodent present on the islands. The Shetland field mouse is the 3rd in the archipelago's 4th endemic subspecies, of which there are 3 varieties on Yell, Fowler and Fair Isle. They are variants of Apudmus sylvaticus, and archaeological evidence suggests that this species was present during the Middle Iron Age. It is possible that Apudmus was introduced from Orkney, where a population has existed since at the least the Bronze Age. Domesticated animals. There are a variety of indigenous breeds, of which the diminutive Shetland pony is probably the best known, as well as being an important part of the Shetland farming tradition. The first written record of the pony was in 1603 in the court books of Shetland and, for its size, it is the strongest of all the horse breeds. Others are the Shetland sheepdog or Sheltie, the endangered Shetland cattle and Shetland goose, and the Shetland sheep, which is believed to have originated prior to 1000 AD. The Grice was a breed of semi-domesticated pig that had a habit of attacking lambs, and that became extinct in 1930. See also: Lists, List of counties of the United Kingdom, List of islands, About Shetland, Mavis Grind, Other Law, Other, Gelteorden, Battle of Florvig, Ra paragraph GNVALD Carly Coulson, Timeline of Prehistoric Scotland, Notes. References. General references. Further reading: Macmillan, Ron. Between Weathers, Travels in 21st Century Shetland. Dingwall, Ross Shire, Sandstone Press. ISBN A190500207,204. OCLCA 220,008,309. Witherington, Donald J., ed. Shetland and the Outside World, 1469 Euro 1969. Aberdeen University Studies Series, No. 15. Oxford, UK, published for the University of Aberdeen by Oxford University Press. ISBN A9780197141076. OCLCA 8195814. External links: Shetland at DMOZ, Shetland Islands Council, shetlandtourism.com, visit.shetland.org, shetlepedia.com, the online Shetland Encyclopedia, HIE Area Profile, Shetland from Highlands and Islands Enterprise, Shitlink, Shetland's online community, shetlanddictionary.com, online Shetland Dictionary, National Library of Scotland, Scottish Screen Archive,